Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Social Contract, a Commander podcast. I'm Mike Allman, and joining me is my co-host, Alex Lapp. Alex, what's up, man?
Not too much, Mike. And if you're anything like the rest of the Magic community, it really truly feels like there is absolutely nothing going on. Because we, for the first time in what feels like years, have had an entire month without a spoiler season.
Yeah. I mean, like, okay, so the Double Masters is like out, right? But like it didn't seem like, okay, there's a bunch of stuff we have to go through. And we didn't do that last episode, which means it's like, all right, it's the next episode. So of course we have to talk about the new. Oh, we don't. Okay. What do we talk about? Oh man, we've been conditioned to not have to worry about it. and now we're
releasing these set every 3 weeks.
Right. Yeah. So we're going to look forward by looking back. And so the next like big thing is going to be the return to Dominaria, right?
Dominaria United.
There you go. But we're not talking about that yet. That's future.
Not out yet as of recording.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the previous Dominaria. And some things that, and I might have got looked over a little bit on there. We've done this with a couple of sets. We did this with Kamigawa, about
Prophecy
and Prophecy, right? Yeah. And looking at these sets that were pre-Commander being a big thing, and looking at these cards and going like, hey, this is something that actually fits really well. Dominaria is. That's not as old. We're talking like 5 years. Like Commander's been a thing here. Yeah. But there's still definitely some stuff like, hey, some of this I see played. Some of this I go, why don't I see this played? Exactly. And I'm kind of in on it. So we're gonna look at some Dominaria cards so we can look at, maybe some inklings of what will be the Dominaria cards that we'll see in the future.
Yeah, we saw a couple of mechanics in this set. One of which that really stuck around, and one of which that really didn't. Mm-hmm. The one that stuck around was Sagas, which is an enchantment subtype. We've seen these come back again and again. I think they're not exactly evergreen, but I think they would call them deciduous.
Yep.
And basically just an enchantment that has its effects broken up across multiple turns. And we saw those introduced here, and we're going to talk about a couple of them. The mechanic that didn't really continue on is legendary spells. Legendary instants and sorceries, which incidentally are not the same kind of legendary as permanents were. And that always bothered me, right? Because legendary is a super type. It should always mean the same thing, no matter what kind of card it's on.
Yeah.
But in this case, legendary sorcery means something very different from legendary enchantment, right? Because a legendary permanent, you can only control one card with that name on the battlefield. And if you have any more, then the rest are put into the graveyard. But with a legendary instant and sorcery, you can't even cast the spell unless you control a legendary creature or planeswalker, which it seems to me, as a Commander player, that they're kind of pushing like, yeah, you control your commander. There you go. There's your answer.
And but, also, Dominaria, it was a lot of historic, right? It was a lot of things that care about, legendaries or artifacts or things along those lines. So I personally really like the idea of like, hey, this is a sorcery you can only cast if you filled this prerequisite of having some kind of legendary creature or planeswalker.
With the idea. The problem
is very cool.
They gave it a super type that means something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It would be like if they had Flash as a a thing, and then they're like, also this thing has Flash, which means something different. Like it is kind of a, hey, no, you could have called that something different. You really could. It's okay. Yeah. But and actually we're going to go into one of the cards in a bit here that has the legendary type, but I'm not sure if it means that it's like the first thing or if it just is a legendary thing or whatever. But that's later. First, let's start with something really, really fun and everybody loves: land destruction. Why don't you start me off with Fall of the Thrand here, Alex?
Wow, that is fun, and everyone does love it.
Woohoo!
Fall of the Thrand, 5 and a white, that's 6 mana. For an enchantment saga, the first chapter says destroy all lands. Yeesh. Second and third chapter are the same. Each player returns 2 land cards from their graveyard to the battlefield. Now, granted, this is a mass land destruction spell, but as far as mass land destruction spells go, this is probably the nicest one.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it's bringing stuff back.
Some lands back. Now, that's not really going to change people's minds about it when you cast this.
Yeah.
But still.
It does feel weird that it costs more mana to destroy everybody's lands and then slowly bring them back than it does to just destroy everybody's lands.
That is true.
It's a 6 mana enchantment.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll talk about it in a future episode because I think I got it.
Each player, right? You'd think normally with symmetric effects they want to discount the raid, so this would be a really cheap mass land destruction spell. But actually, this is the expensive version.
We're going to talk about it a little bit a further episode because I had a playing group experience not too long ago after some time away.
Drama.
I don't know. Destroy all lands. Just always. That's a good way to end a conversation with me, I think. Let's talk about. Let's seal away that conversation. Seal away. 1 and a white for an enchantment with flash. When Seal Away enters the battlefield, exile target tapped creature an opponent controls until Seal Away leaves the battlefield. Okay, so a very hyper specific Oblivion Ring kind of effect.
Yeah.
I like that for 2 mana, and hey, somebody got to tap the thing, which more times than not means they were able to do something with it. Okay, and now, hey, I didn't like that, or I don't want that to happen again. Cool, you need to go in a box for a little bit. I do. The art is really cool. I like it a lot. This huge menacing thing, just kind of tethered to the ground. And it looks almost rusted. I like it. Alex, I'm very easy to please sometimes.
You are. This is definitely one of the more lower power Oblivion Ring style effects.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's so hyper narrow for the added bonus of being 1 mana less. But I like it. I'll tell you what, I'm way too easy to please. Why don't you talk about another one that we're going to go into our first legendary sorcery, and it's a big one.
Yeah, so Urza's Ruinous Blast. It's 4 and a white, 5 mana for a legendary sorcery. You can only cast legendary sorcery if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. It has nothing to do with controlling more than 1 Urza's Ruinous Blast. Mm-hmm. Am I salty? Yes, I am. Exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. Now, I think initially people rated this pretty highly.
Oh, sure.
If only for lore reasons. But also because they thought, wow, I get to keep my commander. Yes, but this is a very unpredictable board wipe, right?
It can be, yeah.
You're not going to be able to tell in advance, okay, is this actually going to deal with the threats that I need? Is this going to hurt me or my opponents more? You don't. It's a wild card, right? And I feel that usually you want to have an idea, even if you have a board wipe that only hits certain things, you probably want to have an idea okay, I'm running this, so it's probably going to benefit me more. So maybe in a Legendary Matters deck, but really outside of that, I think it's just too unpredictable.
It can be. And the other thing that, people really love is when our board wipes say exile as opposed to destroy or bound, right? Yeah. But then you think about the things that you want to exile instead of destroy. And it's we want to get rid of all the indestructible things. You mean the gods, those legendary things that aren't going to be bothered by this anyway? And there's a place for it, but it is also one of those, unless your deck is hyper fixated on having legends, you're going to draw this card, and I think a third of the time to maybe half of the time, it's going to be
Like, oh, I'm blowing
This
everything up except the thing I wanted to blow up.
Yeah, this is kind of an answer, but it's not the one I want.
Right.
But it's cool. This is the card I was foreshadowing on a little bit before. So in Bolus's Clutches, 4 blue for legendary enchantment aura. Enchant permanent. You control enchanted permanent. Enchanted permanent is legendary. So I have a question, Alex.
Oh yeah.
We have legendary permanents, right? Mm-hmm. Legendary creatures, legendary artifacts, cool. This set introduces legendary sorcery kind of stuff, right? So now it's a different subtype where it says you can only cast a legendary sorcery if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. Cool. This is a legendary enchantment that says you... So do I have to have a legendary creature or planeswalker out to cast this?
This is why I hit the mechanic. Legendary as a super type literally means different things depending on what card type it's being applied to. If it's applied to a permanent card, then it means what we think it means. The legend rule, you can control only one, there can be only one, all the rest go to the graveyard. If it's applied to an instant or sorcery card, that's when it means the other thing that has nothing to do with that thing. That means you can't cast the spell unless you control a legendary creature or planeswalker.
Okay. I feel like they decided, hey, we're not going to do the legendary one-off cards anymore. Specifically because, like, then you've got all of these cards that, like, Jessica's Will, right? That is a card that is a sorcery that says, I am this legendary person's thing.
Yeah.
But we're not going to call it a legendary sorcery. So I think at a certain point they went, no, we're not doing that anymore.
That's true. And they really also have moved away from legendary lands. Legend as a super type really means very different things to competitive players and to commander players, right? Because to commander players, if it's a legendary creature, that means it can be your commander. But if it's a legendary anything else,
it means you can have one.
It really just means you can't make copies of it.
Right.
Because it's a 1-0 format, right? Compare that to competitive Magic, where if it's a legendary permanent, you have to definitely make super sure that you want to run more than one in your deck, because if you draw a second, third, or fourth one, it's a dead draw.
Right. And then you get into I need this thing to be there for the deck to work, but I can only have one of them actually doing the deck.
Right. The limitation is a lot less visible for commander players, and the benefit, I think it's really only a hindrance for competitive players.
Mm-hmm. So that's in Bolus's Clutch. No, I'm kidding. Cool legendary enchantment to take something else and make it legendary. Which, I mean, flavor-wise, it makes a lot of sense because it's Bolus making a contract with Liliana and all that good stuff.
Yeah, this is the moment where she'd finally killed all 4 demons on her contract.
Yep.
But it turns out that Bolus was...
Said, haha.
Ha.
Yeah, Bolus, not historically, not super good.
No.
Not a good guy.
Mostly bad.
Yeah. And when you talk about somebody's clutches, that's typically a negative connotation.
Like, you're in the hospital's clutches. It's like, no, I went to the hospital.
Yeah. Cut to every person that has a clutch purse, and they're like, wow, okay, cool. So never mind. You know what? I take it back.
It's
Clutches
interesting it makes
fine.
them legendary. I mean, what is the really functional purpose of that effect other than the lore, right?
Right.
Like, what is that really doing other than, okay, now you can't make copies of this, or rather you can, but they'll die.
I guess, okay, maybe it's if you take something and then you can't play, if you took something and then you made it legendary and then you drew that card in your own deck, you couldn't play it because the other one's legendary, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can play it or cast it. It's going to immediately die.
Right.
Or you pick the other one to immediately die.
This is just your boy desperately searching for a mechanical reason for that, other than for a mechanical reason. That's it. Flavor wise, I like it, but I don't know.
I mean, if we compare this to the original Mind Control, which is 3 blue, enchant creature you control, enchanted creature, and this is 4 blue. Oh, it's any permanent, right?
Yeah, it's any permanent.
It's any permanent, cool. But it makes it legendary.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, if I stole somebody's forest,
yeah,
can I not play forests anymore?
If you stole somebody's forest and you made it into a legendary,
it's a legendary forest
called forest, then yeah, every other. Why would you do that to yourself?
I'm not saying I would. I didn't design the card, man. I'm just trying to figure out how it works.
Yeah, I mean, once you have a legendary permanent, you will, as a state-based action, move all other permanents with the same name as that legendary permanent into the graveyard. Basically, you'll pick one and the rest go away.
So if you had the ability to, I don't know, take over somebody's turn, and
what a frighteningly complex execution. Couldn't you just sacrifice their commander and leave it in the graveyard? Like,
listen,
whatever happened to just kneecapping someone instead of sawing their legs off?
5 years of Magic? I don't know.
He's become a bitter man.
Well, it is what it is. Talk to me about another weird card.
Yeah, Karn's Temporal Sundering, which great art, not so great artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. 4 blue, that's 6. For legendary sorcery, you know what those are now.
Mm-hmm.
Target player takes an extra turn after this one. Return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Exile Karn's Temporal Sundering.
Now, Alex, there's plenty of extra turn spells. Why are we talking about this one?
Well, because many, including this one, have the excellent clause that it's a targeted spell.
Yeah.
So, if you were completely insane, like us, then you might be tempted to, and have done, target the spell at one of your opponents. Say, hey, how would you like an extra turn? They're like, wait, what the heck?
I dig it. The return 1 non-land permanent to its owner's hand thing is always like so forgotten on this. And it's why I actually do like this spell a lot. Again, you mentioned it. The art is cool. But the implication of I'm gonna take another turn, but I'm also going to remove that thing from your board that is kind of a problem. Then I'm going to use this extra turn to take advantage of that thing being gone.
Or they have a board wipe and you can remove your commander back to your hand, and then they do a big board wipe, and then you play back out your commander.
Yeah. Yeah. Play, you can, anytime where it's hey, bounce a thing and do something powerful is usually a good card. Take an extra turn seems like the higher end of bounce something and do something else. But yeah, Karn's Temporal Sundering. Good card. Good job. Good job, Karn. It's like you're powerful or something. Foreshadowing for Karn. But before that, Slinvada, the Rising Deep. 6 blue, legendary creature Leviathan, 8/8. There it is. With kicker. So if you want to pay more than 8, you got this, because you can pay 1 and a blue as an additional cost. When Slimvada, the Rising Deep, enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return all creatures to their owner's hands except for merfolk, krakens, leviathans, octopuses, and serpents.
Yeah, that's Whelming Wave, basically, on your commander. Very, very specific, but if you're running sea monsters, then this is going to blow everyone out except you. It's a pretty standard one-sided board wipe if you build to it.
Yeah, I mean...
you would never, ever run this if you weren't running sea monsters.
No. It's an 8-mana 8/8 for the sake of just being big. You can do better than that. A 10-mana 8/8 that bounces all not your stuff, creature-wise.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. You're paying 8 to 10 mana for an 8/8 with new keywords.
Yeah.
That thing is just sitting there.
It just lorge.
It is an uncommon commander. I think this was was this the first set that did uncommon commanders since the original Legends?
I was actually going to ask that at some point.
I think it was.
I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't, but I'm pretty sure you're right. You know what I mean? Like, I think this is the first time that I ever remember seeing.
Yeah.
You know,
because I remember it was a deal at the time.
Silver Legend.
This was incidentally also when, I should have mentioned this at the start, this is when the Planeswalkers became legendary Planeswalkers, and we lost the Planeswalker redirection rule, and we had the errata to all targeted spells and abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Let me back up a second. The Planeswalker redirection rule was a former rule that basically made it so that if you had a spell or effect that targeted a player and that player controlled a Planeswalker, you could target the player and declare that you are redirecting to their Planeswalker, which is kind of confusing, but it's the same effect as targeting a Planeswalker because now spells can do that.
Right. Just because, again, if you have things that are like, hey, you know, deal 3 damage to target creature or player, and then it's like, well,
and now it's target creature, player, or Planeswalker, or any target,
right? Or any target. Because again, if you make a completely new card type, like, there's going to be stuff that was before that you either have to retrofit or it's just never going to be ability.
But additionally, we had Planeswalkers becoming legendary, right? Previously, Planeswalkers were not legendary. They had the Planeswalker uniqueness rule, which is actually very different to being legendary. The way we had it was, you know how most Planeswalkers have a Planeswalker subtype, or type, excuse me. No, subtype. That, you know, it's, what have you. Karn has the Karn subtype, right? It's just the subtype that is their name. However, the Planeswalker uniqueness rule, before Planeswalkers were legendary, you could only control one Planeswalker of each subtype at a time.
Right.
You couldn't have 2 different Karns because there's many different printings of Karn.
Right. There's
you 47, can do that. You just can't have 2 of the same.
There's 47 different Teferis.
Exactly.
It's like, no, it's okay.
Yeah, that really put a damper on Super Friends decks. But after that limitation, I mean, now you can just run as many. You can run Jace Tribal.
Right. In my head, the reason that it's okay now is because Teferi does a lot of time traveling and he just brings friends with
He just fixed everything.
Yeah, he's like, no, it's fine. There can be 2 different Teferis here because it's just, they're different Teferis in the timeline. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
But what about the Planeswalkers that can't time travel? Like,
they talked to Teferi and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll send you there. Floop. And then he sent them there.
Well, as long as everything's canon.
You know, it's some kind of canon. You want to stop a cannon, you can unwind it. 2 and a blue for an instant. Counter target non-creature spell. Untap up to 3 lands. Cool. Just rewind, but specific and for 1 less mana. I dig it.
And only for non-creature spells.
Yep. I like it. It just I like weirder counter spells. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I have just Counterspell in any of my decks. But I do have weird ones. You know what I mean? Like, I've got Rewind, I've got Unwind, I think I've got the next one we're going to talk about in one of my decks.
Yeah, this one's
Swan Song, tribal, stuff like that. Yeah.
Tribal Counterspell. Wizards retort 1 blue, 3 mana. For an instant, the spell costs 1 less to cast if you control a wizard. Counter target spell, right?
Yep.
So this is just becomes a second counter spell if you are in a wizard deck. So that's pretty specific. Mike, you have a wizard deck?
I had a deck that had a wizard as the commander.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and it was like, you know what? I feel okay playing this because then it's a 3 mana counter spell or it's a 2 mana counter spell when I have my commander out. Cool.
Now it's as good as counter spell.
Yeah, I understand that I'm the one who's wrong here. You know what I mean? But it's
not wrong to run bad cards, Mike.
But it's just like, I don't like Counterspell. It's just, Counterspell.
Oh,
but
sure. Yeah, I mean, Counterspell is cheap, easy, it works.
Yeah. It's like, no, give me Counterspells that are, like, weird. Like, Swan Song, absolutely. It's 1 mana, and I can give somebody a burb. but I can't counter every single thing. Absolutely. I want that.
Denial.
Yep.
One in a blue.
Yep.
Give somebody 2 cards.
Give some cards. Yeah. All that good stuff. Those are my kind of counter spells. Regular counter spell, blah. Wizard's Retort, where it's a conditional counter spell or a counter spell where it costs more. Yeah, that's my speed. There's something wrong with me. It's okay. Why don't we move on to a couple more sagas here and also move on to our next color for black. Alex, talk to me about some scriptures.
Phyrexian scriptures. Now, this artwork people have tried to use because there is no Rosetta Stone. There's no translation for Phyrexian. But we do know that it is a language. So this is one of the few images people have just poured over. If you can see this art, to try to figure out, like, okay, what does this say? Have we seen any of these other runes anywhere before? Stuff like that. 2 black. It's 4 mana for an enchantment saga. You know how sagas work. First chapter, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. That creature becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. Chapter 2, destroy all non-artifact creatures. That's right, this is a board wipe on delay, but you can save 1 thing. And also all of your artifact creatures. Presumably, you're running a black artifact deck.
Yeah.
This is really nice. And then Chapter 3, exile all opponents' graveyards. Yeah, none of it's coming back.
Yeah. So make everything go away for sure.
We have the warning and the escape rope. And then the bad thing. And then the other bad thing. You're not getting any of it back.
Sure. It's a rough card. I don't mind 4 mana. Put this out here. I'm going to show my board wipe next turn.
Right.
Remove it if you want to. And man, the exile all cards from opponents' graveyards is always nice. Just because that only really bothers a certain type of player. So I kind of dig that.
Well, yeah, and it also bothers all the players whose creatures you just destroyed.
Right, but here's the thing. You have to be able to get those creatures back to care about your graveyard being exiled. So typically, there's... I don't... While graveyard recursion is a big thing in our format, I've been lucky enough to not be playing in most games where I'm playing against 3 people who care about graveyard recursion.
Right.
So then it's just one person that I'm like, you're probably going to try and get all that back. Well, you're going to have to get rid of this.
Oh, man. It is interesting. It often seems like people can't decide whether sagas are good or not in Commander.
Right.
Because, like Planeswalkers, they have to remain on the field across multiple turns to churn out value. They really don't... I mean, they have their immediate effects, but usually that first chapter is usually pretty weak, unless it's destroy all lands.
Right.
In which case it's not that weak.
In which case it starts
but
pretty
many
strong.
of them are on the weaker side in the early chapters, and then the second and third chapters tend to be, the more powerful, impactful things. So they really have to remain on the field and not be removed, like Planeswalkers.
Mm-hmm. And then you think about the fact that, now the newer Kamigawa set made things that care about sagas. You got Proliferate and things that care about adding counters to things. You can add lore counters. Cool. There's stuff that has adapted sagas a little bit, but all in all, it's just kind of like this. Hey, we're going to try this weird enchantment idea, and some of it really rough, some of it okay, and I don't know. I kind of like it as just kind of like maybe a Sagas Matter deck would be fun to play at some point.
I read somewhere, I think on the Magic website, that's the original design for Planeswalkers was originally more like sagas, where they each turn activated an ability as they were on the field, but that they felt that this didn't really communicate the fact that they're powerful beings that can make choices. Hence, now Planeswalkers have multiple abilities and their own internal currency, but they still made sagas, which is still this extremely linear. But then they also split the difference and made dungeons.
Right. Well, in my head, I'm also thinking about like, man, can you imagine if most of the planeswalkers were turn 1, activate their plus ability, turn 2, activate their minus ability, turn 3, do their emblem.
Right. I mean, like, emblem would be on like turn 7.
Yeah, like at that point you'd have to. But that, when it's like, oh, it's kind of like a saga. That's how they'll operate. They'll do this, they'll do this, they'll do this. It's like, oh no. I don't need that.
Win the game.
Yeah, turn 3, counter everybody's first spell. Turn 3, get 40 turns. Like, it's just, okay, cool. Well, heck, we'll talk about a really rough one in a bit here. But second saga here, and last one for black. The Eldest Reborn. Hey, look, we're talking about them some more. 4 and a black for an enchantment saga. At lore 1, each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. At lore 2, each opponent discards a card. And then at lore 3, put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. I mean, those happen to be pretty good as far as options.
Yeah, I mean, usually the cost you're looking at, right, to reanimate an arbitrary creature back onto the battlefield is 5.
Right.
And at this point, it's still 5, but to get that effect, you have to wait. But while you're waiting, people are filling up their graveyards with things that you can steal. Although, really, they're going to try to make the least appetizing options for you and possibly also exile stuff out of their own graveyard. I think something that just appeals to us as sagas that maybe not necessarily does to everyone is the fact that they're so rattlesnakey really makes them weaker. Mm-hmm. But it also makes them more engaging, right? This is something that like, okay, guys, well, in 2 turns, I'm going to reanimate the best thing out of your graveyard instead of just casting a spell that does that. Granted, the spell would be faster, easier, and more powerful. They wouldn't have time to prepare. But with a saga, they do have time to prepare. And I don't know, maybe it feels less mean that way.
There's also the fact that, like, there's some spells like, oh, animate dead and reanimate. Like, there's a couple of ones where it's like, hey, it's going to cost less than this, right? But I've always kind of looked at the sagas as, hey, is option 1 something that I would play it if it cost 1 mana less? If that was all the card was, would I do it?
Hell no.
You know what I mean? But that's kind of the way that I have to look at it. Right. Because after that point, it's kind of like, okay, everything else is upside. The same way that we look at planeswalkers.
They could just remove it immediately.
Right. But it's like the same way we look at planeswalkers, and it's like, hey, don't look at the emblem. Because unless you're doing very specific things, you're never going to do that. Unless you're doing doubling season, unless you're pillow forting, unless you're a whole bunch of other stuff, we're never going to do that. Yeah. So what does the other stuff do, right? Eldest Reborn. Hey, cool. 5 mana for in 3 turns. Or sorry, in 2 turns, technically, I guess. We're gonna steal something, right? Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Okay. It's not bad. Especially if it's sacrificing as opposed to destroying. Okay, cool. I think
you're mostly gonna get crap.
Right. But the way that you don't want to look at this is like, okay, this is a 5 mana. I'm going to make that person sacrifice that thing. And then in a couple of turns, I'm going to have it.
Every player, when they first saw Planeswalker, and I think for many games after that, like, wow, look at that Planeswalker's -12 ability. It's so good. Like, you really, really shouldn't be looking at that ability because you're really not going to get to use it.
Yeah. It's... I like planeswalkers. I do. Yeah. We'll get into a bigger topic with them in a little bit. And we've got an episode of full planeswalker talk, but it's been a while. We can revisit it. But before we do that, why don't you talk to me about our singular red card here? Because I'm going to read it while you're talking about it because I don't remember this card.
Yeah, this one's a little bit wacky, and you really haven't seen it at all. Haphazard Bombardment. It's 5 and a red, 6 mana for an enchantment. When Haphazard Bombardment enters the battlefield, choose 4 non-enchantment permanents you don't control. Put an aim counter on each of them. At the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more permanents you don't control have an aim counter on them, destroy one of those permanents at random.
Okay. Right. So, 6 mana, pick 4 things, put a counter on them.
Destroy 3 of them at random.
Destroy 3 of them at random at each end step.
Right.
Okay.
Beginning of your end step.
So I mean, it's a 6 mana, and presuming that it lasts for the turn, it's a 6 mana destroy a thing.
Kill up to 3 things.
Over the course of 3
turns. I think I figured out why we don't see this played. This probably should have cost like 1 and a red.
Yeah. When we were looking at the cards to pick from this set to talk about, and you clicked on this one, and you clicked on it just fast enough where I was like, I don't know what that card is, but wow, there's a lot of words on it, but it sounds like it's a whole lot of words.
Do very much.
Yeah,
this is going for 7 cents right now.
I'm not going to lie, it seems about right.
This is priced so high for such a ridiculously overdrawn, protracted effect that's honestly not super strong and can't really be abused either, right? Because it tends to be pretty difficult to actually move counters, specific counters, from one permanent to another or copy them over.
The only thing I can think of is that it would be kind of fun if you could figure out how to blink this a bunch of times. Because the counters don't go away.
You don't.
So it's just like, no, everything has a name counter.
But even then, you're still only hitting one thing at random.
Oh, it's still terrible. Yeah, for sure.
What is this?
The only thing that I can see about it that I kind of dig is when it gets to the end step. If you're subtle about it and you pick something for every different player, and then it's like, ooh, who's gonna lose? It's like, that effect can be kind of fun.
Dude, I think you lost because you spent 6 mana on this.
Yeah, it's still not great. Like, hey, you know what? You want to have that kind of fun? Just play Possibility Storm. It's better. It's more fun. Just let's do that instead. Let's move on to a significantly better carded one that I actually play a decent amount in my green decks. Broken Bond. 1 and a green. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Cool. It's a sorcery.
Remarkably powerful for a 2 mana common.
Yeah. The sorcery speed is the only downside. That's it.
Yeah, truly.
Naturalize. Much better. Totally understand. However, in my head, if something isn't the most powerful thing in the world, or it's not going to kill me the second that somebody else plays it, this is very good. It's a 2 mana, hey, play a land and destroy something that you'd want to destroy anyway. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a cool. 2 mana 2 for 1, you're going to bend over backwards. Sorcery almost doesn't even, because this, you almost consider it both ramp and spot removal. So the sorcery is not as bad of a limitation. No, not at all. Like, full disclosure, I've targeted somebody else's treasure token at one point with this. Just because I want to get one more land out there. Right. You know what I mean? And I think that says more about me than anything. And it says a lot about you. But like, I like ramp, man. But yeah, it's a common. It's not a bad card by any means. In some ways, it's really good. And it's like, oh, well, the downside is that it's sorcery speed. Cool. I'm still down for that. Like, I don't need instant ramp. This is fine. I like it. This is where Mike realizes he didn't write in the notes what the time code was for Broken Bond. So, Alex, why don't you talk to me about our next card here, one that we've kind of referenced a few times, while I kind of backtrack and figure out where I need to be putting this card for the YouTube video. Yeah, this is Teferi with a 5. You know, when you're running out Teferis and you're trying to disambiguate which Teferi you're talking about. This is the 5 one. Okay. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That's 3 white blue, 5 mana for a legendary planeswalker Teferi, 4 loyalty to start, and 3 really excellent abilities, Mike. Just excellent. +1. Draw a card at the beginning of the next end step, untap up to 2 lands. That is a pretty good +1. If that's the only thing you got to do, then Teferi ended up netting you even on cards, and it only cost you 3 mana. Yeah. Not bad. The -3 is why we're here. Put target non-land permanent into its owner's library 3rd from the top. It's very good. That is I mean, that's Aether Spout, Aether whatever, right? That's removing something utterly. Doesn't matter. Indestructible. Doesn't matter. It's going into their library.
Yeah, if you can target it, it's going to go away. At least without some shenanigans, it's going to go away for a bit.
Right. It's just a stronger bounce to hand. And if a library shuffle is happening, then it's gone.
Oh, yeah.
And then the -8, which, don't look at this one, but we're going to look at it. You get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent and opponent controls. Devastating. Just absolutely devastating. Like most emblems, if you get this one off,
you win
the rest is just gravy.
Right.
Whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent. I mean, so you're just going to start chunking their board pretty quick there.
Yeah. This is why I don't like doubling season.
Yeah,
because that just turns into a 5-mana.
3 just world-class abilities on a 5-mana Planeswalker. This, I think, is one of the strongest Planeswalkers in the format.
Yeah. We've done the Teferi, we've done the Planeswalker episode where we talk about the ones that fit us. We could easily just do like a Teferi Planeswalker episode and just rate them all. Just rank them. Who's the superior Teferi? I'm not saying, like, because there's that many Teferi Planeswalkers.
There's so many. And this one's been rated several times.
Yeah. And with good reason. Like, it's a very good one. Yeah, no, it's a very good card. Like you said, leaning into the first one and the second one. The first 2 effects. Draw a card, beginning of next end step, untap 2 lands, or -3. Put target non-land permanent into its owner's library.
Think about that on tapping 2 lands, right? Because if you activate the +1 twice, after only two turns, including the turn that you cast him, he's already down to 1 mana.
Right. And just as importantly, this is one of those cards that, it's at the beginning of the next end step. Totally understand. It's a blue card. It's a blue and white card. Yeah. So if you're on curve and you put this out with 5 mana, and then you untap 2 lands, and one of them's white. It's like, okay, great. Counterspell, Path, Swords. All those things are now options again.
You can tap out and then be ready to deal with other things later.
Teferi's good. It's like time travel is powerful or something. Ariel, Knight of Windgrace. 2 white-black for a legendary creature, human knight, 4/4 vigilance. 2 white, tap it. Create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. Pay a black, tap it. Tap X, untap knights you control. Destroy target creature with power X or less. In a Knights Matter deck, that's very cool.
Commander. And that is very nice. Having spot removal on your commander, even as one that you have to jump through as many hoops as this one, I mean, that's something that's very threatening, right? She's constantly a rattlesnake, and one that maybe people have to be counting the number of knights you control to make sure that you can't threaten their commander. Yeah.
Well, and just as importantly, the fact that it has vigilance, so it's still doing something in the meantime, that you can hold it up, you can wait until end step for the turn before you, make a token, play another knight. Now you have 2 more knights than maybe it had been expected. Then you tap. Like, the fact that I like it when a card's like, hey, the thing that's scary about it is the thing that doesn't cost as much, because you have to get a lot of other things going first.
Right. I think that the first ability there is the mana dump. Right, when you don't have anything else to spend it on, to use that one. And then once you're free and clear, you're not spending 3 and tapping to make a single 2/2. Once you have a few of the 2/2s on the board, you're using your second ability, really. Because I think that ideally you don't want to use your first ability unless you have nothing else to do with it. Because 3 mana for a 2/2 and tap your commander down, not ideal. But it is nice that she can attack first and then tap down.
Well, that and the fact that the things that you're making also have vigilance.
That's true, they do.
So then you get to have the, I think it's understated. With everything
and then activate the ability to tap more stuff down. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, oh man, I think it's understated sometimes how much Like, simple math says it's twice as good. But, like, it's understated how good a 2/2 token is versus a 1/1. Like,
it is. It's much better. It's literally twice as good.
I already, dang it, I tried to get in front of the joke and it still didn't matter. But the point is like, hey, as you're doing this, right? If I start hitting you with 1/1s, right? Plink. The amount of 1/1s that I have to hit you with, or the amount of times I have to be able to get through, that's going to take a while. A 2/2, yeah, twice as good. Oh, all the good jokes about that aside.
It is twice as good.
2/2, a 2/2 that you can make, and a decent amount of them. You attack with a couple of 2/2s, right? And a 4/4 commander. It's harder to chump block those.
Yeah.
You know,
plus, you're in white and black. You have a lot of lifelink, death touch, all that good stuff,
and vigilance. So it's. I think vigilance is one of my favorite. That's what we're gonna have to do at some point, Alex. We're gonna do a keyword draft, just because we need to do more drafts in this. Yeah, we'll talk about it off screen. Don't worry. Instead, why don't you talk about something that makes a little bit of in my heart? Why don't you talk to me about our next card here and start in artifacts?
Now. I heard, Mike, that Damping Sphere can control the weather. I hear that it reduces storms. It's a 2 mana for an artifact. If a land is tapped for 2
You're just going to try and move past that? No, I'm interrupting you. I'm interrupting you. I get it. It's a good joke, okay? All right, go ahead.
Damping Sphere is 2 mana for an artifact. If a land is tapped for 2 or more mana, it produces colorless. That's a single colorless, instead of any other type and amount. That alone, not bad. It's shutting down guys, Cradle Serra Sanctum, Scorch Ruins, Bounce Lands, anything that's any kind of fancy man land that's making you multiple mana. This says no, not happening. Each spell a player casts costs 1 more to cast for each other spell that player has cast this turn. And, Mike, if somebody's deck was built around that, it would be a Storm deck. Yes, Thank you.
Yep. Sorry, I couldn't go there with you.
Yeah, of course. You get there with me. A Storm deck is building its resources up to the point where it can do its combo turn. In this case, a Storm combo being casting lots of extremely free or refunding mana or drawing cards type spells. Lots of little free, low-cost spells in a single turn. And then, after all that's done, casting a Storm spell, which will copy itself for each spell you've cast this turn. Each spell that has been cast this turn. Right. This artifact makes that strategy almost impossible.
Right.
For most players, it's going to be a minor inconvenience. Like, oh man, now I have to pay 6 instead of 5. For a Storm player, they literally cannot win the game without removing this 2 mana Stax Rock.
It's a very narrow silver bullet, but it's a very, very powerful.
All silver bullets are narrow, Mike. That's why they're silver bullets.
Yep, exactly. And this one is even sphere shaped and everything. It's perfect. It's.
To most players, this is a minor annoyance. To Storm players, it's devastating.
Yep. Well, I mean, like, heck, I don't play a lot of lands that, tap for extra, right?
Yeah.
Just because at that point, I'd just rather have more lands than to extra my lands, right? But, there are times where, like, Dictate of Karametrum, or Ari's Wake, Heartbeat of Spring, like, all these things that say, hey, whenever you tap a land for mana, add another. Well, now, no. Because some of those specifically say, when you tap a land for mana, it adds, as opposed to the thing that you're actually, that's causing the effect.
That's true.
So
if it's a triggered mana ability that's adding mana from the trigger, then this is not applying. It's only if that land taps for additional mana.
Right. Exactly. So there are like some where it's like, oh, well, that's a problem. And some where it's like, oh, that's not a problem. Right?
Right. For the most part, this is meant to stop the big multi-mana, the Soul Lands, the Karus, the...
you said it before. The Gaia's Cradle.
The Gaia's Cradle cycle. All the bad stuff. By which I mean good stuff. I love those lands.
There would be nothing that would make me happier. Again, play group last time. Somebody playing Chatterfang and got their Gaia's Cradle out. And it's like, no, that taps for a colorless now. Sorry.
Wait, what?
Yep. All them squirrels, they're producing you one colorless. But yeah, it is what it is. I like it. I mean, I hate it, but I like it. Howling Golem is 3 mana for 2/3 artifact creature golem. Whenever Howling Golem attacks or blocks, each player draws a card.
Very cool. I love it.
It's just fine. It's just doing the thing. Hey, everybody, have some stuff. Nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's phenomenally low power, but, group hug decks need low power cards, too.
Oh, for sure. And, here's the thing. I like a creature. There was another one. I don't know if it came out in the most recent Dungeons & Dragons set or if it was the set before that. But there's a common artifact creature that whenever it attacks, every player makes a treasure token. I'm gonna put it in a note here so I can try and throw it in there. But, I like those kind of things. I like hey, I'm going to try and hit you with this. You can kill it if you want, but then we're not going to be able to do it next turn. I love those kind of cards. And
the Howling cards.
Yeah, they're great. Howling Golem, very great flavor. I'm super thrilled with that. This is a good card.
Now, drawing cards usually represents gaining knowledge or remembering something. So what is the Howling Golem making you realize?
Well, okay. I think I've got this. So I watch a lot of YouTube while I'm doing my actual work for the most part. And one of the things that I recently saw was the Watch Mojo, 20 best things that the Mythbusters confirmed, right? It's a long walk, but you'll get there with me, I promise. One of the things that they confirmed is when you actually slap sense into somebody, it does work. It effectively does, oh, whack. Oh, yeah, totally. So, Howling Golem is just slapping sense into everybody at the same time.
Okay, I see.
You know what I mean?
You're slapping a card into their hand.
Yeah, well, that's when it attacks. And I think when it blocks, it's it blocks and it's oh no, I've made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. You still learn something. You know what I mean? That part, that was too much of a stretch. But the attack thing, slapping sense into somebody, totally down for it.
There you go. You got it. Howling
Golem, always be attacking. Got it. Always be Karning. Give me our last card here, Alex.
ABK. Karn, Scion of Urza. That's 4 mana for a legendary planeswalker Karn, also known as Nice Karn. Because there was another Karn that got printed pretty shortly after this one that wasn't very nice at all.
Not so nice Karn.
+1. Reveal the top 2 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them. Put that card into your hand. Exile the other with a silver counter on it. Then we have -1. Put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. Mm-hmm. And then -2. Create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token. With this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. And it starts with loyalty 5. Now, Mike, some planeswalkers are like this. They don't really have an ultimate or an emblem effect.
Sure.
They just have 3 effects.
Yeah.
And I've made prodigious use out of all of them. It's really nice to be able to draw cards in colorless, right? Mm-hmm. The card that they don't give you, you can still get back at your discretion with the -1. And you can easily make very large constructs, which are always going to be at least 1/1 because they are themselves artifacts.
Yeah.
With a -2, and it starts with 5. Lots of great options on here. I really like this one.
It's a really good utility piece, right? And I think one of the other things that happens a lot when you're talking about colorless is it costs more. Everything always costs more in colorless. 4 mana for a 5 loyalty planeswalker that when it comes in, you're going to be able to either make an artifact creature that can be really big, depending on your board state, or, hey, look at the top 2 cards. One of them's going to get put in your hand. The other one is going to get put in your hand next turn if it's still around.
That's the other nice thing about the constructs, right, is that it's not just snapshotting it. It's not saying make a 0/0, then put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of artifacts you control. No, this will continuously get larger as your board state increases.
Right. It'll
even
be
early investments are good, and if you make multiple constructs, each of them buffs the other ones.
there's several situations where you can play a Karn Scion of Urza and go, you know what, this isn't going to be huge, but I'm going to -2 it now, and I'm going to get an artifact creature out here. It's only going to be like a 3/3, but I'm good with my hand. I'm just going to get this out here. I'm going to start trying to generate some value now, and that's fine. You know what I mean? Like it's another one of those cards where it's 4 mana. And the downsides don't really exist. You're either going to get cards, go get a card that you wanted later, or make some tokens. Okay,
He's really
cool.
not scary at all. And that's, I think, valuable for a Planeswalker. Because most Planeswalkers, if there's something scary on them, even in the emblem, people are going to be watching them like hawks.
Yeah.
But in the case of Karn, there's no like, well, if you let him get away, he's going to make, exile all permanent, something like that.
Right. Yeah, you're not dealing with you're not dealing with the Teferi.
Yeah.
What's Teferi's loyalty at? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So I need to hit that next turn, otherwise you're going to emblem and win it. Exactly. It's a very high floor with like the ceiling maybe being a couple of inches off the floor.
And this is
it's a really good floor.
Mentioning, right? This isn't always going to apply, but because Karn is exiling the cards with silver counters on them. Rather than just exiling them and remembering them, if for any reason this card leaves and comes back, gets blinked, is destroyed, and you recast it, when he comes back, he can still see all the cards
still got
with silver counters on them, and that's irrelevant.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a good card. It's a good card. Good card.
Good card. Good Karn.
Good Karn. Not mean Karn.
Not mean Karn.
All right, Alex. Of the cards that we talked about, what's your favorite?
Of all the ones we talked about, I think it's Karn.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually run Karn.
Yeah. Well, that'll help.
Yeah, that does help. And he's just consistently valued, right? He's usually, I mean, you would imagine your opponent would try to give you the worst of the two cards, but as we've discussed before, you can give your opponents all the decisions they want about your deck, but I mean, oh no, they're going to give me the worst of the two cards. I put all of those cards in my deck. They're all good. It doesn't matter which one they give me now. I might have to spend, an extra loyalty counter to go get the one they didn't give me.
Right.
If it's really that good. But, I mean, it's basically a +1 draw a card, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. It's +1 draw a card and know what card you're going to get next if you decide not to do
and load up your
cards.
-1 ability if you want to do that.
Yeah. Cool. I dig it. I mean, in the same vein then, you like Karn because high floor and it's a card that you use, right? I'm picking Broken Bond for the same reason. It's a card that I used and it's a high floor, Oh no, it's not instant speed and it gives me another effect. Cool. I really like that effect.
It'd be interesting to see. There can't be too many commons that have come out in the past 10 years that have seen significant commander play.
Oh, sure.
It'd be interesting to see, like, what pauper, pauper commander political social contract cards would we actually play? Do they exist? I'm sure they do, but where are they? We don't know where they are. So I don't know, maybe one episode we'll do pauper social contract.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. That's going to require some work for me, but I'm down for it. It sounds good. I was actually about to say, I wonder how many decks Broken Bond is in. Alex, you don't have that pulled up, do you?
I sure do. Let's pull it up.
Dang it. I don't want you to pull it up. I want you to guess because it's a different number than I thought.
Okay.
I want you to guess.
Say
you can go with a percentage or you can tell me. I'll tell you there's 690,000 decks that have green in it. Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
How many decks do you think Broken Bond is in?
I would say Broken Bond is probably in under 5,000 decks.
It's in 20,000 decks, my dude.
Really? 20,000?
Yeah, I was proud. Good job, everybody.
Wow, that's way higher than I thought.
See, people do like lands. They do like ramp. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, they do like getting 2 for ones at a 2 mana common that probably cost them 1 cent.
Listen, sometimes when you're preaching things, you forget that more people are listening than you thought. Hey, everybody, 2-for-1s are good.
Yeah,
Ramp is good. Removal is good.
It's
good card.
Good.
Great job. All right, Alex. I'll tell you what. If anybody wants to talk to you about how legendary sorceries, legendary enchantment auras that make things legendary, or legendary creatures, etc., if somebody wants to ask you all the ways that legendary exists, how would they find you?
Absolutely, Mike. You can find me on Twitter at Lappermedic, Lappermedic. And if you saw any of the cards today that you thought, wow, I could really mess somebody up with that, and thought you might make an infinite combo, well, you can go on my other project, Commander Spellbook, where we are the search engine for EDH combos. That's commanderspellbook.com.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe and rate the podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, do the subscribe, smash that like button. Do the stuff, please. We appreciate that.
Do podcasts have a like button?
No, that's the YouTube part.
Oh, right.
Yeah, see, we're diversifying our portfolio.
That's good.
If you want to buy, yeah, exactly. Listen, put yourself out there. That's the brand, right? I've said too many of those words. I'm going to say more words like this. If you want to buy any of the cards we talked about, deck boxes, sleeves, etc., you can support us by going to bit.ly/EDH_social. We'll also have a Discord link in the show notes there. You can go and have conversations with us, help us come up with topics, talk to us about your deck list. Talk to Alex about questions that you have as a judge. Things along those lines. You can also follow us on Twitter at EDH_social or email us at thesocialcontractedh@gmail.com. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.